LA Pasadena chapter of Friends of Art's virtual event, the first one of 2021. I'm Hope Anderson, Regional Chair, and today's guest is architect Stephen Corley Randall. Born in Texas, Steve earned his architecture degree at Texas A&M before moving to California, where he has specialized in residential architecture for 3 decades. He has designed houses throughout California and Hawaii and is currently based in Palm Springs. Steve is a contributor to House, the online shelter magazine, and has written extensively on architectural history. He also sells his original house plans online. His website information will be available at the end of the program. Today, he will take us on a virtual tour of the iconic Palm Springs houses of 4 notable 20th century architects: Richard Neutra, William Krisel, Donald Wexler, and Stewart Williams. During the presentation, you can type questions in the comment box. I'll read them at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, I give you Stephen Corley Randall.
Thank you so much, Hope, for asking me to come and talk with your group today, Friends of Art at the Davis Museum of Wellesley College. I appreciate this opportunity very much. As Hope has said, I am an architect in California, and I became an architect so that I could design houses. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a tour in Palm Springs, California, where I currently live, and look at 4 remarkable homes and developments and 4 of those architects who designed those houses. Palm Springs is located 100 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. The mighty San Andreas Fault runs just 10 miles north of the city, which produces our very dramatic landscape. Joshua Tree National Park is to the northeast, and the Salton Sea is to the southeast. The Santa Rosa Mountains, here in the distance, are to the southwest, and as you face west, we have the San Jacinto Mountains and the San Jacinto Peak. The San Jacinto Peak is over 10,000 feet in elevation. The peak is a mere 8 miles from downtown Palm Springs, which elevation is only about 450 feet. It's one of the most dramatic elevation changes in the world. To the northwest, we can see the San Gorgonio Pass and Mount San Gorgonio, which is over 11,000 feet. There, in the lower part of our image, you can see the windmills that are in the near the pass, near the San Gorgonio Pass, which produce our very strong winds that we experience here in Palm Springs. If you are further west against the mountain, you have less of a chance of getting those strong winds, west and south of that mountain that's next to us. How did Palm Springs come to be? Well, of course, there were natural springs that are here. And in the 20s and 30s, it became a resort, a spa resort. Of course, nobody stayed here through the summer because of the extreme temperatures, and air conditioning was not something that you really were able to get at the time. But then in the 30s and 40s, the movie stars, the celebrities from Los Angeles in the film industry, discovered that they could go to Palm Springs. Their contracts restricted them to be within a certain radius of Los Angeles, so that if they were called back to the studios, they could get there quickly. And Palm Springs was just inside this radius. So as time went on, these movie stars started building nice houses in a very good parts of Palm Springs, and hiring architects and prominent architects to do so. And then, of course, in the 50s and into the 60s and 70s, we had presidents move to the area. Eisenhower and Ford both retired in this vicinity, and the area became known for its practically year-round golfing and tennis. So Palm Springs got a national notoriety through all of that process, and we are going to go to our list of architects here and start with Richard Neutra. Richard Neutra was born in Austria. He studied with Adolf Loos and worked for Erich Mendelsohn in Berlin in around 1915, I believe it was. And he ended up immigrating to California in the 1920s and befriended the other architect, Rudolf Schindler. He has his own typeface, which you just saw a moment ago, a Neutra face. And then the second architect that I'm going to talk about is William Stewart Williams, excuse me, Stewart Williams. Stewart Williams was from a family of architects out of Dayton, Ohio. His father designed the office buildings for National Cash Register in that city and did work in Palm Springs in the 30s. By the 1940s, when Williams was working, he decided to move to Palm Springs and open up a practice here, and so did his other family members as well as his brother, who was also an architect. And they created a firm. They did lots of work in the area, including a house that we'll take a look at today. The third architect that I want to talk about is William Krisel. Krisel was born in Shanghai to a prominent film industry businessman. He ended up growing up in Beverly Hills, went to USC, and then formed a architecture firm after he got his license with Dan Palmer. Palmer and Krisel was the name of the firm. They did lots of projects, thousands of houses and condominiums as well in Southern California and in other places across the United States. The last architect that we'll take a look at is Donald Wexler. Wexler was born in South Dakota, grew up in Minneapolis, and then went to the University of Minnesota to get his education. He moved to California around 1950 and worked for a short time for Richard Neutra, our first architect that we're talking about today. But he soon thereafter created his own firm and worked in Palm Springs for many decades and did lots of different types of projects, a few houses, which we'll take a look at one of his today. As we go through this, I want you to think about the architecture in these 5 parts. When you have this mixture, you have a successful architecture. And the first is his history. In Palm Springs, we're mid-century modern. We're in a beautiful location with year-round wonderful weather. The second component is the composition. How is the house laid out? What does it say to the occupants? How does it feel to the occupants? What does it do for them? And then the third element that you want to consider is form. What does the architecture, the physical shape of the architecture say? How does it communicate the design? What does it demonstrate for its occupants? How does it express in its form? Then in fenestration, windows and doors.
As the eyes are the window to the soul, the windows reveal the soul of a building. Doors and windows are important to the character of any building.
And finally, architectural details. The final signature of a building. What does all of the trim, all of the finished materials, what do they say about the architecture? How do they make the exclamation point, the final statement of that building? So think about these as we go through this: history, composition, form, fenestration, and details. The first house we'll take a look at is Richard Neutra's 1946-1947 Kaufmann residence, one of the most famous houses in the entire area, probably in Southern California. This international style architecture, and international style is that style of architecture that developed around the world between World War I and World War II, early modernism, rectilinear forms, cubist massing, walls of glass, disappearing doors. You could use all kinds of materials: stone, stucco, wood, steel, and glass in various combinations, as you see in this particular example. You have a metal fascia, the stone exterior, a stucco exterior, and of course, expanses of glass. So the Kaufmann residence is located near the old Riviera Resort in Palm Springs in the northwest part of the city. The downtown area is to our right here in this historical photo from 1960. And so we're going to go and take a little bit closer look. What I've done here is created a model of this property so that you can get a really good feel for this architecture. There was a carport that you could come into, and then there was the main entrance. And you can see how the forms of the building sort of cascade down. You approach, and these forms cantilever out over you as you enter this beautiful courtyard with its large swimming pool and lawn and boulders. There were, in this part of Palm Springs, there were these large boulders all over the site, which they just incorporated into the landscaping of the project. In January of 1970, Slim Aarons, the famous celebrity photographer, was in Palm Springs, and he knew there was a Neutra house, and he found out who the owner was, called her up. Her name is Nelda Linsk. She was, or is, she still works here as a real estate agent. And he said, can I come over? He said, throw a party, and I'm going to come over and take some photographs. And so he took this particular photo, which I've recreated here for you in my model. But if you look up poolside gossip on the internet, it will come up instantly, and you will probably know that you've seen it somewhere before. That famous photograph where she is sitting on the chaise longue to the right, and her friend, Helen Captor, is sitting to her left on the other chaise longue. She is the wife of another notable Palm Springs architect of the time. I mean, who wouldn't want to be at this party? This was the lifestyle. When this was published, it was the envy across the country for that kind of living. That Palm Springs open air, indoor, outdoor. It's all about being indoors and seeing the outdoors and being outdoor and looking and seeing right through the structure. This house was owned over time by various people. Barry Manilow happened to own it at one point. There were alterations done to it in the 80s and 90s over the years, which really took away from the original architecture. It was bought by a couple in the 90s, which they restored it by the help of an architecture firm in Los Angeles, Marmol Radzner. They did an extensive renovation. It was into the millions of dollars. But I want you to see this house a little more closely here. The pool, this is a gently sloping site, again, with these boulders around it. And the swimming pool is just a few steps below the main part of the house. The main house had a floor that was radiant heat. And he extended that heat into the pool area. Of course, I mean, you know, on a wet January night or a cold January night and you're getting wet out of the pool, you want to have your feet warm at the very least. And so another thing here, you can see it steps up and there's a living area there kind of in the middle of the picture. And the master bedroom suite overlooks the big swimming pool. And then there are these two areas to the west, to that left, upper left, you see a couple of bedrooms. And then to the north of that, you see a pool and you see the guest suites. And what I love about this arrangement is that they have this spiraling effect out from the central core of the house. And when you think about it, these areas of the house are all very private. If you go to your master bedroom, you have that sort of isolated area there. And if you go to your other bedrooms there to the left, you have some privacy from the rest of the house behind the kitchen. And of course, the guest suites are also very private. You go outside before you go back inside to actually get to them. So you have a very casita effect is what we call that here. Or we call them casitas, where it's detached from the main house. And see the pool there, that's a cooling pond, which I'll show a little bit more in a minute. And on the left-hand side of that were these metal louvers that they could open and close. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then on the roof, what Neutra did is he put on a gloriette. He called it a gloriette. It was a roof deck. And the fireplace from the living room extended up there, and they had a fireplace for that space as well. So after he got this house going, it was built for $348,000, a huge amount of money at the time, of course, and it's which is an equivalent of about $4.7 million today. Considering that the house is actually on the market right now for $25 million, I think that may have been a good investment, although, of course, the renovations that they did in the 90s were quite expensive as well. And as we go forward here on our slides, I'll go back to this overview of the house, and we'll twirl around and talk about these forms. I love the massing, this spiraling effect that comes around the chimney, anchors the whole scheme. You have this wonderful roof deck, these simple planes and simple planes of walls with a single material that define glass walls that they face out into private patios. And these louvers that you see on the gloriette on the pool, what they would do is they would open and close those depending on that northwest wind that was coming in from the San Gregorio Pass to protect them from those strong winds. As you go in here, you can see kind of the intimacy of the spaces, this wonderful guest suite here to your right, and this courtyard with its boulders and lawn and pool. And I'm going to come around here and I'm going to swing into this gloriette. There's the fireplace. They had a planter put in place as the railing. You come up on a staircase from the outside, and there to your left in that square form that's coming up through the roof there is a shaft that goes to the kitchen. Well, they had a dumbwaiter in there because, of course, you have to be able to get your drinks and hors d'oeuvres up to the deck because that's what Palm Springs is all about, having a good time with your friends, drinks, cocktails, going out to dinner. So the next house we're going to look at is Stewart Williams' 1953 Edris residence. As you approach this house from these photos that you can see here, it sort of pops up out of the landscape, and you have this wonderful shape of this roof form that you see. Its stone was quarried locally, and I call this sort of an understated luxury. It is not an international style modern, it's an organic style modern, a little bit different than our Neutra house. So let's go in here a little bit closer and take a look at this roof form. What I've done here for us is another model of this house, and I really want to look carefully at this wonderful wedge-shaped roof form, which I think really makes the statement about this house. Remember, form is one of our important elements in architecture. As you can see, the stone walls make up the fireplace, and there align the guest suite. Clear story windows. These expanses of glass were interspersed with steel columns, which supported that wood roof form. On the north side of the house, we have a private terrace for the master bedroom and our master bedroom area. And then there is an outdoor space, that stone terrace that wraps around the entire configuration. And then here, as we go on, we're going to go inside the house now. And again, this indoor-outdoor living that is so precious to Palm Springs and Southern California living. Our planter space goes right through this glass, this plate glass window. That's where the front door is. The wall goes through the glass. The same material goes through the glass. When we enter, to the left is a dining space. There's a planter here we'll take a look at more in a photo in just a moment. Beautiful views out that stone terrace and across into the mountains. And we enter this marvelous living room space with these giant picture windows that face to the southeast. You can see those large boulders. This house is not far from the Neutra residence in Northwest Palm Springs as well. You can see this large fireplace with the stone hearth coming right through that glass in front of the fireplace. And as we turn here to the corner of the living room in the ceiling, Williams left those rafters exposed so that they could put the lighting in there for that wonderful artwork that they have above their sofa. And of course, some other features in this living room were a built-in hi-fi. If you're of my era, you remember what a hi-fi is. If you're younger than us, you probably don't, but that was the thing to have at the time. As we turn back toward where we came into the house, that entryway and that planter, the kitchen is beyond the dining room here behind those folding doors. You can see there's a clear story glass to let the light go right through to the kitchen and the dining area. And we have this wonderful planter, which didn't really catch on in the long run because pets tended to favor those more than humans, if you know what I mean. But as we back up here, we look back toward our entry. The first door there goes into the guest room, and then there's a closet door. There's a double door that goes to a wet bar. Of course, there's a wet bar. Again, all about the cocktails. We see our planter, and Williams designed these little Dixie cup type light fixtures that reflected the other light fixtures that were in the house. And now we're going to turn back toward that kitchen. It was a fairly modest kitchen. People here don't tend to eat in a whole lot. Eating out and getting together with friends is what you really do. We're going to turn, as you go past the dining room, you enter the master suite of this house. And you start to enter this wonderful dressing room space first. And again, it has an access to that stone terrace and beautiful views in the distance to the south and southeast. And as we go here, I'm going to show you this photo, this original photo. All of these photos are on courtesy of the Huntington Library out of Pasadena, and they're original from the 50s. This wonderful floating dresser and vanity space and this floating wall that makes up this master bedroom suite bath area. There in the distant, there are these frosted glass enclosures that hold the shower and the toilet compartment. And then you enter the master bedroom area, the bedroom area of this home. And again, you have a stone terrace that you can go out onto, the plate glass, the clear story window going right to the ceiling, seeming to just disappear into that Douglas fir ceiling and Douglas fir walls. And then walnut paneling is this other wood that you see here, especially on the cabinets and in this partition area. And we also have here a ceramic tiled semi-sunken bathtub. Quite a luxurious and spacious master suite dressing area for a home of the time. This house cost about $127,000 to build at the time. They had originally had this wonderful sun deck with this curved wall. They since taken that out so they can have a view and a spa hot tub here in that space. But you can see there on the north end, there's this access to the master bedroom and shower area, indoor, outdoor shower. And as we come back around to the stone terrace, we see a view of that marvelous cascading of boulders down to the swimming pool area and that view, that dramatic view to the southeast in the mountains with this wonderful wedge-shaped roof kind of lifting the whole composition off the landscape. Remarkable design, I find. Really love this. It was one of Williams' favorite projects. And this is the guest suite of the house. You see the stone wall and those wonderful clear story windows. And as we turn back around here, we go toward a wardrobe area and a dressing room, and there's a bathroom, a private dressing room and bathroom for this suite as well. Only 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms for this house. And it's private stone terrace outside that they had their own space to go onto. Again, with the wonderful views and the boulders surrounding the landscape outside. The next architect that we want to talk about is William Krisel. And Krisel was a partner with Dan Palmer. In 1958, they were hired by the Alexander Construction Company, the famous Palm Springs construction company that built so many of these modern houses at the time. They bought a piece of land, a large tract of land in the southern part of Palm Springs, beautiful location with wonderful mountain views. And they decided that they really needed to take advantage of those wonderful views, and they sited all the houses and designed them with these wonderful clear story windows. You can see the clear story window there above the masonry, the brick in this, the white brick in this particular example that we're looking at. All of these houses had this feature, and when you are inside these houses, and I've been in several of them, the mountain views are spectacular, really wonderful. It was designed to be, you know, an accessible development. It was not like building the Edris house or the Kaufmann house. These were more moderately priced. I believe they were around $18,000 to $22,000. You could get a swimming pool installed with that, I believe. And what's really interesting here, to save money, Krisel said, okay, we'll come up with one floor plan, just one floor plan instead of having several. And but what we'll do is we'll turn them and give them different roof forms. And that's what we want to take a look at next. So they had 6 different roof configurations that you can see here. On the top 2, you have the butterfly shape. In the center 2, you have a flat roof shape. And then in the lower 2, you have a gabled roof form. We're going to take a closer look at that in a minute. But next, I want to show you the floor plan that they used for these houses. This was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. 40 by 40 was the floor plan. 1,600 square feet, quite nice for the time period. And that was a little bit larger than the average house of that time. And a contiguous kitchen, dining, living room, and then a fireplace with this wonderful large glass walls that would face the backyard. And of course, they all came with a swimming pool. And then you had a carport to your right in this configuration. So what's interesting that they did here, oh, and incidentally, between those 2 bathrooms, you may notice they installed an atrium. Remember atriums? Of course, Almost everyone who has one of these houses has unfortunately filled those atriums in with a closet. But oh well, that was the original design anyway. Some of the ones that have been restored have reinstalled that atrium. But let's turn this plan, which is what they did, and you see the entry of the house now is positioned toward the front, and then we take our carport and reposition that to the other side of the house, and we have a completely different configuration. And they would shift the carport either forward or backward on this, and that would give them variation along with those roof forms. Brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love this. This is one of the most coveted developments in Palm Springs. The ones that are on the historical register now are selling for $1.5 million at this point. They're very desirable properties right now, which I'm sure they will continue to be. So now we're going to take a closer look at these roof forms. On the top, we have our first butterfly, which is affectionately known as the long butterfly. You can see that the main body of the house there on the left is covered with a single roof form that slopes down to where you enter this courtyard space where you enter the house. And then you have your carport where the roof then shoots up again in the other direction, and that crease occurs right there at the carport in the courtyard. Then on the lower example, what they did is they took the butterfly roof form and they put a crease there over the center of the main body of the house of the floor plan. And then the carport got a flat roof there off to the left that you can see. This particular house is on the historic register. Here it is. It is currently owned by a local real estate agent who has very affectionately taken very good care of this house over the past 10 years. Again, wonderful architecture, very different, same floor plan, different house. And here are our flat roof examples. In the upper photo, you can see that the flat roof covers the main body floor plan of the house, and then we have a lower roof form there coming off to the right over the carport to de-emphasize the car structure, which is always a good thing to do. And also you'll notice that there's kind of a flap over there at the front part of that roof line. And that flap faced west in this particular house and shielded the clear story windows that are behind it so that you could protect from the sun. They have this device on several of these flat roofed houses. And then on this lower example, you'll see here that they have a more of a trellised type of flap that you see. And this roof form is flat also, but it's a little bit higher over the living and kitchen areas. And then it's a little bit lower over the bedrooms, and then a little bit lower there to the right over the carport. Now, this house has been altered from its original condition. They've made that a garage, but you can see the difference in where they have moved the carport further forward than they did on that example in the top photo, another variation. And of course, the last roof configuration that they had is a gable roof form. A gable roof is simply two slopes that come up and meet at a ridge. And in the top example, even more ingenious is this slightly shallower slope on the right with a slightly steeper slope on the left. The bedrooms were there on the right, and the living, kitchen, dining was there on the left. And the ridge line of it runs from front to back, and the carport is a little bit forward of the front of the house. But on the bottom photo, what they've done here is they've taken the ridge parallel to the street. You can see that the gable roof form is facing the street side. So same floor plan on all 6 of these houses, slightly different configurations for the porch and the courtyard, and voila, you have an almost entirely custom looking development. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. The final architect that we'll take a look at today is Donald Wexler. In 1962, he was hired by the same Alexander Construction Company to start a development in the northern part of Palm Springs. Again, it was intended to be an affordable place for people to buy a house. These ran, in the $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 range, depending on pool and features, and there were options for them. But what happened here is that Wexler decided to use steel frame construction, which was something that was being done widely across Southern California at the time by many mid-century architects. And so they got this development going. They built 7 of these houses. However, after they got this started, the price of steel skyrocketed. It was a sort of corporation political drama that played out between Kennedy and the steel corporations, unfortunately, that put a standstill to this development. They had intended to build 35, but they only built the 7. The Alexanders said it was going to be too expensive to do the rest, but that they wouldn't be affordable anymore, and that's not what they were going for. However, we do have these 7 examples, which I think are marvelous examples of mid-century modern architecture. What's great about these houses that you can see here is how crisp the lines are. It's all steel. There's hardly any wood in these houses whatsoever. Still just as remarkably straight and even as they were from the day they were built. I love that about them. So let's take a little bit closer look at this structure. I want you to see how they put this together. So I've done this model for us here. And what you have here is this carport space, and you can see these posts down the center of it. So our carport is cantilevered, which you can do with the steel so easily right over that carport. And then that belt line that they have, that carport top, it runs right around the whole house and underscores those clear story windows that are above the belt line beneath this wonderful W-shaped butterfly folded roof form, whatever you want to call it, this accent here to the left that comes off the living room and the glass wall of windows. And these panels, you can see these individual panels are steel that are on the bedrooms at this end of the structure. They both have, there's 2 bedrooms in this particular model. They both have access to this side of the house. And then there's a door there in the center, which went to a bathroom, because you want to be able to access a bathroom from the pool area that you have in your backyard. And then he would set this scheme off with a minor stone sort of accent wall in the front of the property. A really remarkably unique piece of architecture that I think is remarkable for the time. So let's take a closer look at how they did this. They have a concrete slab foundation, and then they have this 2-bedroom, 2-bath floor plan. And they made an option, and nobody did this at the time. They're all the 2-bedroom, 2-bath with this central core where the kitchen is. But they gave them an option to add another bedroom and add another bedroom ensuite behind the carport. So you could have a 4-bedroom, 3-bath if you wanted to. And I'm going to go back and show you how they did this. So they were semi-modular, and what Wexler did is he had these prefabricated systems, this central core done, which they would set into place first, shipped to the site, set in place, and then they had the exterior walls built in a factory in Los Angeles, and then shipped to the site and set in place. And then they would come back and start filling in partition walls, drywall for doing the rest of the interior walls. And then they would top that with the roof decking, which is also steel, and then do a roof finish material and gutters on top of that to catch the rain. And this central core here was where the plumbing and the ducting and the mechanical systems ran for these particular houses. Quite an efficient design for the time. As I said, they finished off their roof configuration, and then they added these wonderful trusses to create these steel trusses and clear story windows to create this very unique roof form that goes over the living room spaces of this particular design. So they had 3 different roof configurations planned for this development, and the other roof form was this flat roof form. There was a gable roof form which they never built, but here's an example of one of the other flat roof forms that you can see, and you can see how the flat roof form sort of extends over that wall of windows there to the left. You see that short stone wall, which is the accent to contrast the steel that he used in the landscape. And of course, our carport. Our carport here does not have the center post, but it does have posts on the 4 ends to the steel structure. Here is another example of that same house. The carport's set back. Again, the variation of the carport made a little bit of a difference, and the carport is set slightly back from the main body of the house. You see that wall of windows there to the right, and our low stone wall. This particular stone, this green stone, is quite rare around here. I still have not found out where they got that stone. It had to have been something probably within Riverside County, California, where we're located around here, that he got that. It's actually a beautiful stone, but rarely used, or I've seen it rarely used anyway. But kind of a nice contrast to that steel structure that you see here. And then here's an example of, this is the other one that was done with this interesting butterfly roof form. This particular house was significantly modified, probably in the 70s, 80s, maybe 90s. And it had another carport built in front of that carport. And it had wrought iron on it. And it was just a mess. So what somebody has done here is it's under renovation, and they're taking it back to its original state, which is a good thing. Palm Springs has many examples of architecture that's been altered over the years, and people are now taking it back to the original state. What's interesting about this is that in the 90s, if you came to Palm Springs and you wanted to buy something, it was very cheap. I know that these houses were going for, anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 at the time, and now they're worth somewhere between. If they're fixed up, they're worth somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000. So, quite a difference in just 20 years in price. The last house here I want to show you, which is very interesting. At the same time Wexler was doing that development for the Alexanders, he was designing a house for the actress and singer Dinah Shore in the very beautiful old Las Palmas neighborhood of Palm Springs. He designed this 7,000 square foot, very lavish estate on over an acre, has its own tennis court, swimming pool. It's about 7,000 square feet. But you can see similarities here. The masonry material is called slump stone. It's something that we see in the Southwest. It's not used that often. It's a little bit softer, of sort of a mud brick type of material, brick material, masonry material. But it looks really good contrasting with the steel in this example, I think. And what's interesting about this house is that Leonardo DiCaprio bought this house, I believe, in 2014. As far as I know, he still owns it. They do rent it. You can rent it. The last I checked, the going rate for this was about $4,500 per night. So I don't know what the situation is right now with it, but maybe someday you can come to Palm Springs and rent Donald Wexler's Dinah Shore Leonardo DiCaprio home with some friends, right? Pool that money together and you can do it. So today, what I've shown you here is a sampling of 4 different houses and 4 different developments, and kind of giving you a way to think of architecture in context of what expresses architecture. It's historical context. What we're talking about today is all mid-century modern design. And what's interesting about this is that the term mid-century modern is not something that entered the lexicon until the late 1990s. I mean, I know growing up, my mother called these houses contemporary. That's what we called them. You either said it's modern or it's contemporary. So that term is sort of a what would you call it? A throwback. It's a term coined later to refer to a period of time there when this kind of design was done, not only for architecture, but in cars and furniture and fashion. It was a whole era that went and is defined unto itself. But in our Neutra house here on the upper left, its most interesting part that I think about this house is its composition. This wonderful spiraling floor plan that comes out, and this gentle sloping site, and that beautiful swimming pool space that we took a look at. I think it's a remarkable example of architecture and how Neutra solved the site. It is as I said, it's one of the most iconic Southern California houses of all time. And then we have our Edris house here on the upper right that we looked at in a second video with designed by Stewart Williams. And that house is, again, the organic modern. It's springing up out of the landscape, almost disguised in a way, but then it shoots off with that wonderful wedge-shaped roof form that flies off of the house into the sky. A fantastic use of form. Then on the lower left here, we have our Krisel design, this mid-century modern house that is all about the fenestration, the windows, those clear story windows. When you're inside these houses, you look out and you see those incredible views of Palm Springs in the distance. And then in our last example, we have this marvelous experimental steel construction that Donald Wexler used here in this house, and the marvelous steel details and that detail of that wonderful folded W-shaped butterfly roof that you see there. And you can see, if you look closely there, you can see the small steel trusses that hold up those steel panels that then make up the top of the roof form. Remarkable architecture, all of it. And that's why I wanted to show you all of this today. This is something that I love. I've loved it ever since I was a little kid. This is my passion. It never gets old for me, and it never will. So thank you for listening. I'm so glad that you came to visit us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all did too. I have some questions, so I'll read them. Kristen Thompson says, would you please expand a bit upon the difference between composition and form as architectural elements?
Certainly. So when I'm talking about composition, I'm talking more conceptual. When I say, okay, how are we going to solve the project? How are we going to arrange the building on the site? What is the objective of this building? What does it serve? What does it do for the occupants? And of course, this applies to any kind of building, but in this context, we're talking about houses. You know, for example, the composition of the Neutra house, it's a luxury estate. When we get down to the Wexler steel house, that's a very conservative, modest building in comparison, right? That's all about the composition. Form is the physical form, the shapes that we're using, the shape that you see of the building, the cubist form of the Neutra house, the sloped shape of the butterfly roof, the form. What does the form do for the architecture? What does the form say about the architecture? That would be the difference between composition and form.
Kristen also says, love your illustration of the modular options for the Wexler steel houses. So then we have a question from Dovana Pagowski to everyone. Where were the older / mature trees kept? Was any home designed around them?
So, so really, there's not oak trees, or there's not significant trees in this vicinity that you would be building around for the most part. Trees in this area occur in the oases of the desert, which would be in ravines and in the bottom, along creeks, and those would be palo verdes. And then there is only one type of palm tree that is actually native to the area. So really, these sites, for the most part, are just a desert landscape, fairly bare. As you've seen, some of the sites were filled with these very large boulders. I mean, what's going on in a geologic term is that Palm Springs is surrounded by very massive earthquake faults, and the mountains are being pushed up on one side and pushed down on the other side, and you have this rocky, desert landscape all around us. So it's mostly sort of desert scrub and cacti of different types and rocks for the most part, and sand.
So Claire Chu asks, did the original buyers prefer one roof type over another for the Krisel homes?
Well, that is a good question. I don't think I really know, but I do know this, is that the butterflies are highly desirable. That seems to be the most popular catchphrase and term that people seem to grab onto. I have a house designed floor plan, and that's one of my most popular, is the butterfly roof design that I have. So I don't know at the time that was the most popular. It may very well have been. I believe also it's interesting that the Alexanders owned one of them, and they owned the long butterfly. So maybe it was the butterfly at the time. Very well could be.
So let's see. Emily Wilson says the Frey house was built around a rock.
The Frey, we looked at the Frey house, yeah, which we didn't look at today, but Albert Frey was another architect in town, just as prominent as the rest of them that we looked at. And the Frey house is actually built up on a hillside right next to downtown. And he built the house so that I believe it's maybe in the bedroom. If you're in the bedroom of the house, there's a large boulder and glass goes right up to it. And then the boulder is part of the architecture of the house. Yes, that's correct. That house is, I have not been in it myself, but it has been on modernism tours in the past. So some of you may have even seen it.
So Emily says that was in reference to Devana's question about building around trees. So since there were no trees, it was easier to build around rocks, right? As in the Edris house?
Well, so easier to build around? I would say it's easier to build around trees.
No, but I'm saying that the rocks were more readily available than trees.
Oh, exactly. You had plenty of rocks to use in your landscape for sure, yeah.
Okay, so another question, as is Elizabeth Heilman. Brooke Murray says, I'm curious about architecture that is being built today. How have these designs, if they have, affected the designs today?
That's a terrific question. And absolutely, they're in Palm Springs. There are a number of architects doing good work. There was one in particular that I think is doing some pretty remarkable projects. His name is Sean Lockyer. He has a firm with a acronym name, which I don't know off the top of my head, but Sean Lockyer is doing really nice work. He did a house just across the street from the Edris house in the past couple of years that is, in ways, when you look at it, it has similar roof forms that they used on the Edris house. I think the Edris house is really special in its very pure, sort of simple way that it was done. The house that they did is they call the Schnabel house. I believe the Schnabel family own it. And it's a bit more complex. It's much larger. I think there was plenty of influence with that. Other architects in town tend to do, it's really kind of all the same reflection of this architecture. It is not exactly the same, and this is what's interesting about this, is because, you got to think about the period of time that we're talking about here. Single pane glass, cheap energy. You simply cannot do that anymore. These windows, especially in the Edris house, where they go right up to that ceiling and they look like they just disappear into that roof line. We really can't do that anymore because of the energy codes. We have very strict energy codes in California. It makes our houses much more efficient and use much less energy. But these large expanses of glass, I'm afraid, were a sort of a relic of the time.
Mary Flannery asks, how has mid-century modern influenced your work?
So I love this question. Thank you so much. So I love it all. I love everything. I'm fascinated by anything that people live in, whether it's a high rise or a condo or a house. I work mostly with single family houses, but I've done condominiums. As far as affecting the work that I do, it's a lot of the work that I have done has been remodels and additions in the San Francisco Bay Area. So what I try to do is I always try to make the addition, when it's an addition, blend into the existing structure, make it look like it's always been there. That's kind of one of my pet peeves, is to make it look like it always belonged. And I've been able to do that for the most part with most clients. There's been a couple of situations where they've insisted on doing something that I didn't really care for. And, you have to be diplomatic with people, and sometimes you have to do what they really want, which is fine. And some of the new houses that I've done, they've also been more traditional than I would say contemporary or modern architecture. Again, what I'm doing is I'm really trying to reflect the local environment in the neighborhood. Especially in the Bay Area, we have design review boards, which are quite strict. So to do something really avant-garde is sometimes not that easy. And I believe I had one project one time where that was a bit of a challenge. We had to make alterations as we went along. It did get built, but it was a lengthy and costly process. So as far as how mid-century modern affects me, it's just another branch of architecture that I find fascinating in and of itself. I have made a point of understanding all of it as much as I can and being able to appreciate all of it as much as I can. I love classical architecture. Classical architecture is a wonderful architecture. And this is my motto. All good design is timeless and deserves respect and replication. That's my motto.
So Dovana Pagowski asks, by serendipity, I am in Palm Springs as we speak by Twin Palms. How was the Indian Canyon Golf Course incorporated into the housing arrangement, before or after?
After, you mean, is the question, was it done after that development?
Right.
What was Canyons done after that development? And I believe the answer is yes. Yeah. And Krisel did a lot of those buildings in the canyons as well. I believe either Wexler or Krisel did the country club there, and I don't know off the top of my head which one it is. I want to say it's Krisel, but Krisel also did, if you're in the neighborhood, there's a place called the Ocotillo Lodge. That was done by Krisel, and it was done before the Twin Palms Estates. And what they did is they used the Ocotillo Lodge, and people would come and stay there, and they would advertise in the lodge for the development, which was right behind that hotel. So interesting tidbit there, Palm Springs history.
This is from Mary Flannery. I think she missed the beginning. Have you lived in Palm Springs, and where do you live now?
So I have lived in Palm Springs for 14 years. I came here from the San Francisco area. I lived in San Francisco the last time before I came here. I lived there for 20 years. And I live in South Palm Springs in a neighborhood that they call Area B Commons. If you know Palm Springs at all, there is the famous John Lautner designed Edris Elrod House and the John Lautner designed Hope Residence, which looks like a flying saucer up on the top of the hill. I live right below that. And what's interesting is I live in a newer development, and it is what I call Mexican modern. And this development was really it follows the design aesthetic of two well-known mid-century modern Mexican architects, Luis Barragan and Ricardo Legarreta. And so it's our development has all of our houses are different colors. We have red, green, brown, white, orange. It's really quite remarkable. And I love living here because it's it's a very unique place. There's not any other place like it nearby.
Any other questions? I guess we can wrap it up unless you want to say something else, Steve.
I'm grateful to have had the chance to share my passion with your listeners. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Follow me on my websites and YouTube channel and social media accounts. Cheers, my friends.